say that Jesus was indeed 33 years old when he was crucified and rose again. But they also leave out other parts that are important that we can actually look into the Bible to find. In the Torah, you can find that no one would begin their teaching, their ministry, or their rabbinical work until they were 30 years old. And so chronologically, they ascertain that Jesus was actually baptized at 30 and moved through his ministry for 3 years, finally ending up here. Now, the plot's going to thicken and also sort of set here. This is a system of measuring the Earth that navigators use. It's called the navigational system for nautical miles. This is what you use if you're going to fly around the Earth in a spaceship or in a plane, because it's based on ratio, and it's a system based on ratio and time. It's not statute miles. Statute miles are something different. They're actually aligned to the number of feet that Queen Elizabeth decided would fit into a mile on the Earth. This is based on a ratio. All it is there's 360 degrees in a circle, and there's 60 minutes in an hour. So if you have a clock, and you know how many degrees are in a circle, and you have a good enough catalog of having measured where the stars are every day for a whole year as we go around the sun, you could move anywhere along in longitude, which is the lines that go up and down like this. You can move anywhere along this Earth and figure out, if you had a good enough clock, where you were by knowing the time and by knowing the system and having a chart. And you can actually measure the distance around the Earth, because it's an easy equation. 60 minutes and 360 is 21,600. So there's 21,600 miles around the Earth at its greatest circumference. It's called the Great Circle. And you have many great circle distances in longitude, only one for the equator in latitude, because it gets smaller as you move out to the poles. But in olden times, they didn't have 360 degrees. In fact, the 360-degree system in navigation was used, what we can ascertain was 1200 AD all the way up to 1690. Even though there was an understanding there was 360 degrees in the circle, you never did that with navigation. You just used the basic compass rose. Well, guess what happens when you multiply 60 minutes times 33, or the perfect 33 and a third? Basically, what this is doing is measuring the whole Earth, then, in increments that are just a ratio. And to make it clear, the ratio would be exactly the same for miles on, say, the size of a basketball as it would for Jupiter or the Sun. It's always going to be the same distance around based on this ratio. It's just a measurement system. So if you actually have only 33 increments around a circle, and you still are using the clock that has 60 minutes in it, you end up with 2012. I'm perfectly honest, 2012 is the number that you have, and the decimal point then is 0.9, which is, it's the division between 2012 and 2013. That's a significant thing, because when you look into the Torah, a child wouldn't actually be responsible for keeping the law until he was in that margin between 12 and 13. Hebrews would measure age from the first year birth would be 1. Not like when we wait till someone actually is born and then hits 1. So it's that margin between 12 and 13 where you become responsible for the law. So in nautical miles, then, using 360 degrees in the circle, you end up with a 33.33 degree swath of the Earth equaling this, 2012 nautical miles. What's astounding about this is that this proportion has existed for hundreds of years. That's why 33 is such a big deal when it comes to the navigators, the travelers to the east, the fraternal orders of Illuminati. There's more to this. These symbols will pin down exactly why 2012 is significant, and other signs that can pin down exactly where it falls chronologically in our history. As you can see, this is a fleur-de-lis. These were put on the north edge of the compass roses. You'll see it often superimposed with a phoenix, which is significant. A lot of times you'll see all these symbols put together: the compass, the rose, the cross, and the phoenix. You can usually tell the phoenix because of that little distinctive little tuft of feathers on the back of his head. Looks like an eagle, but it's a phoenix, especially when it's combined with these symbols. This is kind of a muddy picture, but it's the same idea. The rose cross up here. Here's a red cross and the compass, and then your phoenix underneath. Very enigmatic. This is a rose cross also, and you can see the strange geometric sort of redundancy going on here. They're measuring circles, compasses, and then you have a distinctive 4 animals on each point. What does that mean? One of the most important things then to understand then is their focus of the illuminated fraternities on this symbol. This is Irenaeus in the Middle Ages was able to kind of pull together the symbols from ancient times that you would actually find in the Old Testament, these cherubim beings that have 4 faces, and he applied that to the gospel writers. This one happens to be the gospel writer John. And here they are all represented together, the 4 gospel writers, and John's down here with, for some strange reason, 3 crosses on his head. The symbol has 3. In the Old Testament, the cherubim were typically drawn with a human face, wings of an eagle, 4 fronts of a lion, and then the back part would have been a part of a bull. These ones are almost correct because the tail would curl the right way. This is the Ark of the Covenant. This is the Holy of Holies, a rendition of what it might have looked like. And this is an interpretation of what that actually may have symbolized. On the ecliptic of the zodiac, the ecliptic is where we sight the sun as it travels around the earth. You'll have 12 major signs. And at the 4 corners where the stars are the brightest, you have Aquarius, which would be the face of the man, Taurus, the bull. Here, you'd have Scorpio, but in ancient times it was just called Ophiuchus, which was a serpent contender. And it wasn't a scorpion, it was a man stepping on a scorpion holding a snake, and then some other symbols would be this bird, an eagle, which also contends with serpents. And then Leo here, who has eagle wings, but it's one of the only images I could get that would look like it was actually made to be in the zodiac. It's interesting, too, that in the Old Testament, the tribes of Israel had symbols that they were given, and they were always supposed to be ordered around the tabernacle in this configuration that, if you look at the symbols, correspond to these 4 corners of the ecliptic in symbols. And here, the eagle is at the north, which corresponds to the tribe of Dan. There's more to this symbol. You'll see in grimoires and works of Freemasonry a connection between this eagle symbol and this Ouroboros, as it's called, the tail eater, or what Jung has actually talked about as some symbol that means cycles of time. But it is ubiquitous. It goes all over the world. It's ancient. It's one of the most ancient symbols there are. This is an Aztec one. Here's one from a gravestone in England. Of course, the Chinese one. This one is interesting because it comes from a postcard from Rosh Hashanah. And this is depicted as it's actually a fish that they eat during the beginning of the new year. It actually says here, Leviathan. So if you go and look up Leviathan in a concordance, in a dictionary,